The morning in Denver was cold enough that every breath turned to white mist. Inside a small apartment, Elena Moore stood before the stove, a spatula in her hand, the smell of half-cooked eggs filling the kitchen. She was about to add a pinch of salt when Daniel's phone, resting on the counter, vibrated. She meant to ignore the phone until the screen lit up. "Can't wait for tonight, your place again?" In that instant, the world went still. The spatula slipped from her hand, oil hissing in the pan. Silence spread across the kitchen, broken only by the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She stared at the screen, trying to convince herself it was a mistake, but logic failed. Her trembling fingers reached for the phone. No passcode. Daniel had always said he had nothing to hide. Maybe he'd just assumed she'd never look. The message thread opened, revealing an endless line of texts. The name at the top, Jessica, blurred photos, flirtatious words, meetings arranged on the very nights she worked overtime to pay their bills. Each word struck her like ice water. Every vein seemed to turn cold, her chest hollowing out with disbelief. She didn't even notice the bathroom door open until Daniel stepped out, a towel wrapped around his waist, droplets sliding down his shoulders. When he saw her holding his phone, he stopped, not in guilt, but irritation. "Elena, what are you doing?" His tone was flat, almost weary, as if she were the problem. Her throat tightened. "Who is she?" He sighed, avoiding her gaze. "A friend." She lifted the phone, her voice shaking with rage and pain. "A friend? This kind of friend?" The photo on the screen, half naked, captioned, "Miss you already." Daniel's expression hardened. "I was going to tell you, I just hadn't yet." "Haven't or never planned to," she snapped. He reached out, taking the phone from her hand. Not violent, just firm enough to reclaim control. "Elena, this isn't working. I'm not ready to be a father." The words landed like a blow. "I'm carrying your child, and that's what you say to me?" "You want to keep it," he said coldly. "I don't, and honestly, I'm not even sure it's mine." The air left her lungs. 2 years together, 6 months living under the same roof, and he doubted her loyalty with such ease. He didn't shout, didn't apologize, just discarded her like a burden he'd grown tired of carrying. Elena stood frozen, rage, grief, disbelief, all tangled inside her chest until she could hardly breathe. Daniel adjusted his towel, already turning away. "I'll cover rent for this month. You should pack before the weekend." She said nothing. Didn't cry, didn't beg. Just silence, heavy and final. When he disappeared into the bedroom, she snatched her car keys. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to leave. Outside, the sky was an iron gray. Snow began to fall harder, thick flakes covering the city streets. Her coat was too thin, her breath shallow as she stepped into the wind. Behind her, the apartment door closed, the sound of an ending. She climbed into her car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The storm swallowed the road ahead. The radio crackled with a blizzard warning. She turned it off. She couldn't bear another voice. Tears blurred her vision as headlights cut through white. One thought echoed in her mind, relentless. "I'm not even sure it's mine." Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "Mom's still here." The highway climbed into the Colorado mountains, winding through forests buried in snow. The storm grew wilder, the car shuddering under each gust of wind. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Snow lashed at the windshield, and the wipers screeched in vain. Her pulse raced. The world outside, turned to a wall of white. Then movement. A deer appeared in her headlights, frozen mid-step. She gasped and jerked the wheel. The tires hit black ice. The back of the car swung out, spinning sideways. Metal screamed. The guardrail flashed past. The car flipped once, twice, maybe more. Glass exploded. The world turned into fragments of light and sound. Elena's body slammed against the seatbelt. Air ripped from her lungs. Her scream vanished under the roar of the storm. Then came a final, deafening crash, the car rolling onto its side, one wheel still spinning in the air. Inside, silence settled, thick and deadly. Elena blinked through blood and snow, dazed, the metallic taste of fear on her tongue. The cold seeped in through the shattered window, biting into her skin. She tried to move, pain shooting through every limb. The shock from the crash hadn't even faded when darkness swallowed everything. The world around Elena dissolved into a void without shape or sound. Only the wind howled beyond the twisted frame of her car, and an eerie silence filled the space where her heartbeat should have been. She didn't know how long she'd been unconscious. When Elena came to, her breath felt frozen in her chest. The air reeked of gasoline and blood, sharp, metallic, heavy. The car lay on its side, one window shattered, snow pouring in, through the broken seals. The headlights flickered weakly, scattering light over shards of glass that glittered like fractured stars. She tried to move, but pain ripped through her spine, leaving her paralyzed. Blood trickled from her forehead, mingling with melting snow that stung her skin. Somewhere deep inside, her heart still beat. Slow, uneven, fragile. Then one thought pierced through the haze. The baby. With trembling hands, Elena touched her stomach, whispering through chattering teeth, "Please, please stay alive." The words drifted into the frozen air, dissolving with her breath. Outside, snow kept falling, relentless, endless. Each flake hit the crumpled metal, hissed, and vanished into steam. Gritting her teeth, she fumbled for the seatbelt. It wouldn't move. Her fingers slipped, nails tearing, skin bleeding. She pulled again, harder, until the lock finally clicked open and her body slumped forward. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she forced herself to keep moving. The smell of fuel was stronger now, dizzying. Panic clawed at her throat. She had to get out before something worse happened. She searched for the door handle, but it was jammed. Desperation filled her veins. She slammed her fist against the glass, crying out into the storm. A crack spread across the window. Her eyes fell on the broken heel lying near the passenger seat, one of her shoes from earlier that night. She grabbed it, swung it against the window again and again. Each strike echoed like a heartbeat, a plea. The glass fractured, then exploded outward, shards scattering into the snow. A wave of cold air burst in, biting her skin. Snow swirled inside the wreck. Elena crawled out, every movement trembling, her coat soaked with blood and melted ice. The outside air cut through her like knives. She could barely breathe, each gasp sharp and shallow. Lifting her head, she saw nothing but an endless field of white. The car lay half buried, nose tilted toward the ravine. Smoke rose faintly from the engine. She tried to stand, but her knees buckled, throwing her into the snow. Gritting her teeth, she dragged herself forward, each motion a battle. Tears mixed with snow. Her lips turned blue. Her breaths came in short, ragged bursts. The vast silence of the mountains pressed down, terrifying in its emptiness. A single thought surfaced. If I die here, No one will ever find me. Then she thought of the baby, and something inside her refused to give up. With a broken cry, she pushed herself upright and staggered toward the road. Her body screamed in pain, yet she moved, driven by instinct, by the fragile fire of survival. She didn't know how far she went, only that the darkness never seemed to end. The storm tore at her face, cutting her skin. Still, she kept walking until her vision blurred and her body finally gave out. Falling forward, she caught a flicker of light, distant, flickering through the snow, and the faint hum of an engine. She tried to call out, but no sound came. Her throat was raw, her voice gone. The last thing she saw, before surrendering to the dark, was that distant beam of headlights slicing through the blizzard, distant, ghostly, yet strangely warm. Then there was only silence. The storm showed no sign of mercy. The wind screamed, hurling waves of white across the mountains, swallowing the world in its howl. Through the blizzard came a faint golden glow, cutting across the night like a blade. Elena lay sprawled in the snow, hands curled toward her chest, breath fading. Somewhere in the distance, an engine roared closer. Tires crunched over the ice. A door slammed. The sound of boots pressing into the snow approached her, deliberate, powerful. Then a deep, commanding voice broke through the chaos. "Don't move." Elena wasn't sure she could even if she wanted to. The beam of a flashlight passed over her face, searing through the darkness. The man knelt beside her, removed his glove, and pressed 2 fingers against her neck. "Faint pulse," he said quietly. "Still alive." A second voice, younger, spoke behind him. "How long has she been out, sir?" The man glanced toward the wrecked car, smoke curling from the hood. "No more than 20 minutes. Any later, and she'd be gone from hypothermia." His men spread a stretcher. The man bent down, sliding his arms beneath her body. His hands were burning warm, pulling her out of the snow with a strength that felt almost unreal. She tried to speak, but only a broken sound escaped her lips. "Don't talk," he murmured. "You're going to be fine." They carried her to a large black SUV idling nearby. As the door opened, heat flooded out, sharp enough to make her shiver from the shock. Inside, the air smelled of leather, smoke, and melted snow. She caught a glimpse of a silver-winged insignia embroidered on his coat. Vale Security. The name tugged at something in her fading memory. She had translated contracts for that corporation months ago. Her lips trembled. Vale. He looked down at her, his gaze dark but steady. Yes, Ethan Vale. Of course, she had seen his name before, printed neatly on official documents. Founder and CEO of Vale Global Security. Never did she imagine that the man whose signature sat beneath government defense contracts would be the same one holding her in his arms on a mountain road. "Straight to the estate," Ethan ordered the driver. "No hospital." His voice left no room for debate. "Sir, she's bleeding. She needs," the driver began, but Ethan cut him off. "No, every hospital in this region reports to the police and press. She has no ID on her, and I don't want questions. A single rumor could turn this into a headline. She doesn't need that." His tone softened slightly, more to himself than to anyone else. "Especially not when she nearly died, because we weren't faster." The SUV tore through the icy slopes, wheels hissing on the road. Elena lay against his chest, trembling violently. Ethan removed his heavy coat and wrapped it around her, pressing her closer to share his body heat. "Elena, "Can you hear me?" he asked, voice low, urgent beneath the hum of the engine. She blinked, barely opening her eyes, meeting his gaze. His face was sharp, controlled, but his eyes carried something different, worry. "Stay with me. Keep breathing." My baby," she whispered, the words fragile as snowflakes. "The baby's fine," he said quickly. "You both will be." He kept his hand steady on her shoulder, his voice an anchor amid the chaos outside. He continued quietly, as if explaining to ease her confusion. "I know your name from your ID. Your wallet was in the car. Elena Moore, 27, Denver. That's you, right?" She gave a faint nod, too weak for words. Silence filled the cabin, broken only by the rumble of the tires. The soft amber glow from the dashboard traced the edge of his jaw, highlighting the small scar near his chin. He looked composed, dangerous, but there was something else buried in his expression. Guilt, maybe, or a strange pull he couldn't define. Ethan took out his phone and dialed. "Call Dr. Forrester, have the medical suite ready. Warm temperature, heart monitor, fluids. Tell no one else." He paused, listening, then added, "She's not a regular patient. I found her on the ridge. Keep it discreet." By the time he ended the call, Elena had drifted back into unconsciousness. He checked her breathing, relieved by the faint rise and fall of her chest. Outside, the storm still raged, but the faint outline of the Vale estate appeared ahead, light shimmering through the white. Ethan looked down at her again. Something tightened in his chest, an unfamiliar feeling he hadn't allowed himself in years. He didn't know who she was beyond a name, but she was now under his protection. And that meant something in his world. "She's going to live," he said quietly, almost to himself. His fingers brushed over her cold hand, feeling the weak but steady pulse beneath her skin. The storm screamed beyond the glass, but inside the car it was just warmth, her breathing, and the thin thread of life he refused to let go. The storm outside had not yet quieted, but inside the black SUV everything fell into a strange calm. Ethan looked down at the woman unconscious in his arms and noticed her skin was no longer pale. The faint glow of the Vale estate appeared through the snow, a vast structure hidden among pine trees, its glass walls shimmering gold beneath the blizzard's veil. When the car stopped before the iron gates, he gave a curt nod. The massive doors opened soundlessly, and the storm was shut out the moment he stepped inside, carrying her. When Elena awoke, the world was white. Morning light streamed through tall glass windows, pale and soft, casting faint reflections across the walls. She blinked, disoriented, realizing she was no longer in the car, no longer in the storm. The air smelled faintly of lavender and cedarwood. The room was large and elegant, painted in cream, with sheer curtains billowing slightly from the heat rising off a stone fireplace. Everything felt meticulously designed, beautiful, warm, yet unsettling in its perfection. She pushed herself upright, a wave of dizziness flooding her senses. Her hand instinctively went to her belly. For a heartbeat, she froze, waiting. Then a tiny flutter, faint but real. A sob escaped her, half relief, half disbelief. The door opened quietly. A man entered, his expression gentle but professional, a leather notebook in hand. "Good morning, Ms. Moore. I'm Dr. Forrester." His tone was calm, deliberate. "You were unconscious for roughly 10 hours. Some minor bruising, a few stitches, but nothing severe. The baby's heartbeat is steady." Her breath hitched. "And the man who brought me here?" "Mr. Vale?" he replied simply. He found you on the mountain a few minutes later, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. The doctor smiled faintly, though his eyes avoided hers. Rest now. I'll report to him and return later. When he left, silence settled again. The name Vale echoed in her mind, Ethan Vale. The signature she'd once translated on a contract, now the man who had pulled her from death. A soft knock followed. This time a woman's voice spoke through the door. "May I come in?" The voice was smooth, controlled. Elena nodded weakly. The door opened to reveal a tall woman in a gray-fitted suit, her posture impeccable, her dark hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck. "I'm Isla Vale," she said, her voice precise and poised. "Ethan's sister." Elena blinked. "Your brother saved me." "Yes," Isla replied, scanning the room as though inspecting every detail. "And he asked me to ensure you're comfortable. I should clarify, this isn't a hospital. We prefer to keep matters private. You were found without identification, and the press here, they feed on accidents like wolves." Elena hesitated. He said, "I could go home?" Isla smiled, courteous but unreadable. "The mountain roads are still closed. It may take 3 days before travel's possible. Until then, you'll be cared for. All expenses covered by my brother." Her tone was diplomatic, polite, yet carried a quiet authority that reminded Elena she was a guest, or perhaps something closer to a responsibility. "Please understand," Isla continued, her eyes softening only slightly. "We mean no harm, but this estate isn't open to strangers." When Isla left, the faint scent of her perfume lingered, along with the sense that the door had locked her in rather than out. Elena rose and approached the window. Outside, the forest stretched endlessly under snow, serene yet isolating. Men in dark coats patrolled near the gates. Small cameras blinked discreetly at the corners. The air here was beautiful, yes, but too controlled, too still. The door opened once more. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. Ethan Vale stepped inside, silent as a shadow. Dressed in black, his presence filled the space with a quiet gravity. His eyes met hers, unreadable beneath the morning light. "Elena," he said softly, "how do you feel?" "I'm alive," she answered, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound composed. "Thank you for saving me." "No need," he said evenly. "I happened to be on that road." Then, after a pause, his tone lowered. "If you need anything, ask Isla or Dr. Forrester. You're safe here." That word, safe, echoed again. It was the same word he'd whispered the night before, yet in daylight it carried a different weight. Safe, but not free. Sheltered, but watched. As he turned to leave, she found her voice. "Mr. Vale, why were you on that road last night?" He stopped, gazing out the window, where snow still fell in soft sheets. "I don't believe in coincidence, Ms. Moore. Maybe some people are meant to be found." His eyes met hers once more, steady, unreadable, and something in her chest tightened. When the door closed behind him, the only sound left was the quiet crackle of fire and the faint whisper of her own heartbeat, uncertain and afraid, inside this place that looked like paradise but felt too much like a cage. Time at the Vale estate passed differently from the outside world. Each day moved in quiet rhythm, so precise that Elena began to lose her sense of time. Mornings arrived in pale light, filtering through sheer curtains. Evenings glowed in soft gold from hallway lamps that never went completely dark. Her wounds healed faster than expected, perhaps thanks to Dr. Forrester's care. Or maybe because the air here, though cold, was unnervingly still. 3 days later, Isla appeared again, sharp and immaculate as ever, in her tailored gray suit. "Dr. Forrester says you're recovering well," she said, eyes assessing every detail. "My brother's pleased, and there's something I'd like to discuss. I understand you used to work as a translator?" Elena hesitated. "Yes, freelance, mostly technical documents and trade contracts." "Excellent." Isla placed a thick folder on the desk. "We have several international contracts in urgent need of translation. Partners in Italy, Switzerland, Belgium. Ethan mentioned you're fluent in Italian?" The sound of his name made her pulse quicken. "Yes, then you can help. We'll pay triple market rate. Think of it as something to keep you occupied while you recover." Isla's tone was smooth, polite, yet carried an undertone of command. "These documents stay here. If you need anything, ring the bell." After she left, Elena opened the folder. Fresh ink and crisp paper. Vale International Logistics. Confidential trade agreement. She began to read. At first, it looked routine. Shipping routes, distribution schedules, partner signatures. But the deeper she read, the more uneasy she became. There were vague terms, words that didn't belong in standard commerce, special transport, strategic assets, restricted materials. No commodity codes, no declared values. The Italian drafts used materiale sensibile, sensitive materials. The kind of phrasing used in military contracts. Her heart began to race. Every instinct told her to close the file, to stop asking questions. But the translator in her, the part trained to see what others missed, refused to look away. Every page bore Ethan Vale's signature, stamped with the crest of Vale Global Security. She remembered his calm words that night. "We can't go to the hospital." Now she finally understood why. By evening, she'd finished the first batch. Outside, snow fell silently, covering the pine forest in white. She stood to stretch and froze. A flash of light outside the window caught her eye. Not lightning, metal glint. She crept closer, peering through the curtain. Below, 2 men in black carried rifles, pacing the perimeter. Near the gates, a vehicle idled, armored, engine running. On the roof, a figure stood with a night vision scope, scanning the woods. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't a mansion, it was a fortress. She stepped back, pulse pounding. Isla's words echoed in her head. The Vale estate isn't a place strangers usually visit. Suddenly, everything looked different. The cameras tucked between paintings, the electronic lock that glowed green but had no handle inside. She wondered what would happen if she tried to leave. That night, sleep refused to come. Every creak of the house made her flinch. Ethan's voice haunted her memory. No hospital. Now she knew why. This place wasn't merely his home. It was the center of something hidden, something governed by its own laws. The next morning, Isla returned with breakfast. Elena forced herself to sound calm. "Thank you, I finished part of the translation. Though, something wrong?" Isla asked, voice mild, but eyes sharp. "Some of the terminology. Strategic assets, special transport. What kind of business is this exactly?" For a brief second, Isla's smile faltered, then returned, flawless and cold. "We have clients who prefer discretion. Some things aren't meant to be listed publicly. You understand, commerce can be delicate." It was an answer I crafted to end questions, not to invite them. After she left, Elena returned to the window. The guards were still there, rifles glinting under the morning light. Beyond the gates, the forest was silent. The estate wasn't just protecting secrets, it was the secret. And she was now far too deep inside it to ever walk away. The wind roared that night, rattling the curtains against the window. Elena sat at the desk, the lamp casting a soft golden light over the open pages in front of her. She wasn't reading anymore. The same words repeated like a spell. Special transport, strategic assets, confidential operation. The ticking clock grew louder, stretching each second into an eternity. Beyond the door, the hall light glowed faintly, a light that never went out, as if the house itself refused to sleep. She rose and turned the handle, locked. The digital lock glowed green but had no switch inside. For the second time, she realized that Vale Estate wasn't a sanctuary. It was a prison disguised as luxury. She returned to the desk, staring at the folder Isla had given her. Fear battled curiosity until the latter won. She opened the drawer, a habit she hadn't even realized, and found a small black USB drive engraved with the Vale insignia. Without thinking, she plugged it in. A folder appeared, Project Halcyon, Tier 1 classified. A password prompt blinked. She typed, Vale, wrong, then Ethan Vale, wrong again. She was about to remove it when the door behind her creaked open. What are you doing? The voice froze her. She turned. Ethan Vale stood in the doorway, half his face lit by the desk lamp. He wasn't shouting, he didn't need to. His eyes, dark and unwavering, carried the kind of authority that silenced everything else. I was just reviewing the documents, she stammered, pulse hammering in her throat. He approached, each step deliberate, reducing the distance between them until the air itself felt heavy. He stopped beside her, resting his hand on the desk near the USB. His voice dropped, low and quiet, too calm. You weren't supposed to touch that. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was curious. There's so much I don't understand about this place. He didn't answer immediately. The firelight flickered across his face, deepening the shadows under his eyes. Curiosity, he finally said, is dangerous here. Every question costs something. The price of truth? She murmured. He looked at her, truly looked, his gaze sharp, unreadable. The price of survival, he said. Information isn't shared here, Ms. Moore. It's guarded, sometimes buried. Her voice trembled. Then what am I, Mr. Vale? A guest or a prisoner? He met her eyes. Someone who owes her life, and I'd rather you didn't lose it over a small mistake. There was no anger in his tone, only a weight that felt heavier than threat. Something in his expression shifted, a flicker of concern, quickly hidden. She couldn't tell if it was real or calculated. Ethan moved to the window, his silhouette outlined by the pale moonlight. I know you're afraid, he said quietly. But believe me, there are worse things beyond these walls. Her breath caught. What are you talking about? The world Vale Security protects isn't just about contracts or shipments. Some things aren't meant to exist in the wrong hands. And there are people who'd kill to get them. He turned back to her, voice steady. The night you crashed, do you really think that was random? Her body went cold. You mean it wasn't an accident? Your car was hit from behind, no brake marks. I have satellite footage, he said calmly. If I hadn't taken that road, you wouldn't be alive. Silence swallowed the room. Elena stepped back, her bare feet cold against the floor. Who would want to kill me? He didn't answer. His voice softened instead. That's what I'm trying to find out. Their eyes locked, fear meeting something she couldn't name. The fire crackled softly, painting warmth on his features, turning his sharp edges human, if only for a second. "You should rest," he said finally, his tone gentler. "I'll have these documents secured, and as for Project Halcyon, forget it exists." He left, the door closing behind him with a soft click, leaving only the faint trace of smoke and silence. Elena stared at the empty space where he'd stood. Gratitude and suspicion tangled inside her chest. Who was this man really? What was he hiding behind those steady eyes? Outside, the wind screamed against the glass. Inside, the quiet grew heavier, pressing against her heart. She realized then the most dangerous thing at Vale Estate wasn't outside its walls. It was here, in this room, in the thin line between trust and fear, between the man who saved her and the secrets he refused to let her see. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. Ethan's voice echoed in her head, calm, cold, steady, the kind of voice that could make someone afraid and yet want to believe. She lay awake, staring at the firelight flickering across the walls, his words replaying over and over. "The night you crashed, that wasn't an accident." Each syllable was a shard of ice lodged in her chest. Outside, the storm had gone eerily silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Close to midnight, a faint sound broke the stillness, soft, metallic, like someone tapping glass. Elena opened her eyes. At first, she thought she imagined it, but then it came again. Tap, tap. She rose, went to the window, pulled the curtain slightly, only to see white. Snow, endless and empty. Then the explosion hit. A thunderous roar ripped through the air, shaking the walls. The windows shuddered violently as an alarm screamed to life. She fell to the floor as glass shattered, and red lights began flashing across the ceiling. "Elena!" Isla's voice cut through the chaos. She burst through the doorway, her usually perfect composure breaking only in her wild hair and pale face. "Come on, now!" Before Elena could speak, a man appeared behind Isla, Ryan, the head of security. His tone was clipped, military. "Both of you with me. Don't separate." Isla grabbed her arm and pulled her down the corridor. Red emergency lights flickered along the walls, painting everything in blood tones. The floor was littered with shards of glass. Another explosion sounded, closer this time. The end window shattered, snow and wind bursting through. Ryan reached a section of the hallway and yanked up a metal panel from the floor. "Down! Steel shelter below! Move!" Isla pushed Elena first. The metal ladder was freezing under her palms. As soon as they reached the bottom, the door above sealed shut with a heavy clang, cutting off the noise of the outside world. Dim yellow light flickered across concrete walls. The air smelled of metal and dust. Elena slumped down, shaking. "What's happening?" Ryan adjusted his earpiece, eyes on the small surveillance monitor. "Attack, main gate, armed group, 4 vehicles minimum. Explosives used on the fence." Elena turned toward Isla, who sat still, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wasn't panicking, she looked resigned. Through the intercom, Ethan's voice filled the room, calm, commanding, every syllable precise. "Alpha team, block the west flank. Don't let them breach Section B. Ryan, status on the shelter?" "Secure," Ryan answered instantly. "Ms. Vale and Ms. Moore are below." "Stay there," Ethan ordered. "No one moves until I say." Then silence. Elena tilted her head back, listening. Distant gunfire rattled through the walls, muffled but real. Her heart pounded in her throat. Isla leaned closer, her voice softer but steady. "He knows what he's doing. Just breathe." "Breathe," Elena snapped, her voice trembling. "Someone's shooting outside, and I don't even know who they are. He told me I was targeted before. And now this. What the hell is going on here?" Isla's gaze softened. She hesitated, then said quietly, "Our family isn't entirely legal." The words hit harder than the explosions. Elena stared, unable to speak. Isla continued, her voice calm, almost weary. "Vale Security isn't just a protection firm. We work with governments, and people governments can't acknowledge. We transport, guard, and recover things the world isn't ready to see. Things that must never fall into the wrong hands." Her eyes flicked upward as another explosion echoed above. "But we're not villains, Elena. Not anymore. Ethan's trying to fix what our father built." "Your father?" "He ran Vale Security like a private army," Isla said, bitterness threading her tone. "He sold technology, weapons, information. When Ethan took over, he ended it. But some people didn't forgive him for that. They want back what he's keeping from them." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And they'll kill anyone who stands in their way." A violent tremor shook the shelter, the lights flickering. Dust rained from the ceiling. Ryan barked into his radio. "They've breached the outer line. Ethan, where are you?" Through the static, Ethan's voice came back, calm as ever. "Stay calm, Ryan. Take them deeper underground. I'm heading to the roof." Elena's eyes widened. "He's insane. They have guns." Isla's jaw tightened. "No, my brother's never lost a fight in his own house." Another explosion boomed overhead. The lights flickered off, then back on. In that flicker, Elena caught something in Isla's eyes. Fear, raw and human. Not fear of death, but fear of losing the one person holding this fragile world together. When dawn broke, the Vale estate still smelled of smoke and gunpowder. The snow near the fence had turned gray with ash, and black scorch marks scarred the ground like old wounds. Elna stood at the window on the second floor, watching the black-clad men clean up what remained. They worked silently, efficiently, as if death was simply part of their routine. Ethan appeared behind her, saying nothing for a long moment before speaking, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "No one inside was hurt, but 2 of my men are dead." Elena turned to face him. The morning light caught the tired angles of his face, the dark circles under his eyes. "Who were they?" "People I swore to protect," he said quietly. "And I failed them." The weight of his words filled the room. She looked at his hands, streaked with dried blood, and whispered, "Who attacked us?" He poured himself a drink, ignoring the question for a moment. "Not old enemies," he said finally, "former allies. They want back what I've taken from them." "What is it?" "It doesn't matter," he said, setting the glass down. "What matters is that you understand this. The Vale organization isn't what people think it is." He turned toward her, his voice low, steady. "We don't run drugs. We don't traffic people. We don't profit from misery. But blood still gets spilled. Always." Elena said nothing. It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession, and that made it worse. Ethan stepped closer, eyes fixed on her. "I'm not proud of everything I've done, but I protect those the system leaves behind. The ones labeled criminals simply because they have no power. Someone has to do the dirty work to keep the rest of the world clean. I just make sure that work has rules." "Rules?" she asked softly. "No harm to innocence, no exploitation of children, no betrayal of trust." His gaze didn't waver. Those three keep us human." She drew in a shaky breath. Her instincts screamed at her to run. Yet another part of her, the part that saw pain behind his calm, wanted to stay. "Why tell me this?" "Because you deserve to know where you are," he said. "I hate lies, but silence can be worse." He set down the glass, meeting her eyes. "So I'm giving you two choices." The air seemed to still between them. "First," he said, "you leave. I'll give you enough money to start over anywhere, with private protection. You'll be safe. You'll forget this ever existed." He paused, voice dropping lower. Or what?" she asked, her heart pounding. "Or you stay, you learn everything, and you accept that once you do, there's no going back." His words sliced through her, clean and sharp. She searched his face for deceit, but all she found was exhaustion and a loneliness that mirrored her own. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why trust me this much?" "Because I found you in the snow, bleeding and freezing, still holding your stomach, like you could shield what mattered most," he said softly. "People like that don't betray." She turned away, blinking back tears. Inside her, morality clashed with loyalty, fear tangled with something deeper, something dangerous. After a long silence, she asked quietly, "If I stay, who do I become?" Ethan's answer came slow and steady. "Someone who sees the world as it really is, not black or white, just people trying to keep the dark from swallowing the light." She nodded slightly, though her heart trembled. In the glow of the firelight, their eyes met, not as savior and survivor, but as two souls already bound by something unspoken, fragile, and frighteningly real. After Ethan left her room that night, Elena didn't sleep. His words echoed in her mind. "If you stay, there's no going back." And yet, when morning came, when sunlight filtered through the thick glass, she was still there. She hadn't run. She'd chosen to stay. Days at the Vale estate returned to their unnerving calm. Outside was snow. Inside, precision and silence. Every door locked electronically, every call routed through security. Elena learned the rhythm of this fortress, peaceful on the surface, suffocating underneath. Then, one afternoon, the sound of an engine broke the stillness. She froze, pen hovering over paper. No one ever arrived here unannounced. She moved to the hall window, and her heart stopped. A silver SUV parked by the gate. From it stepped a woman in a beige coat, dark hair blowing in the wind. Elena knew that walk instantly. Sophie Kim, her best friend, her other life. For a moment, Elena couldn't breathe. How had Sophie found her? Outside, Ryan spoke with her at the gate, but Sophie showed her phone, a photo of Elena smiling. After a few tense exchanges, the gate opened. Elena ran downstairs. When the front doors swung open, cold air rushed in. Sophie threw her arms around her. "Oh my God, you're alive! You vanished for weeks. No calls, no texts, no posts. I thought you were dead." Elena hugged her back, tears pricking her eyes. "I'm okay. Things just happened." Sophie pulled away, glancing around the massive stone hall, the armed guards, the cameras. "Okay, this place looks like a military bunker, wearing designer clothes." Before Elena could answer, a familiar voice cut through the air. "Your guest, I presume?" Ethan descended the staircase, composed but watchful, dressed in black. Sophie straightened, offering a polite but wary smile. "You must be Ethan Vale. I've heard of you. Security magnate, ex-intelligence consultant." "Only within limits," he replied coolly, eyes shifting to Elena. "She seems eager to see you." She's my friend, Elena said quickly. She was worried. Then join me for dinner, Ethan said simply. I dislike leaving guests out in the cold. Dinner was exquisite and unbearable. Candlelight flickered over polished crystal. Wine glowed dark red in their glasses. Ethan sat at the head of the table, Isla beside him, the two women across. Sophie barely touched her food. She watched, observed, every movement of the guards, every sound in the corridor. When one passed the doorway, she leaned toward Elena, whispering, "Those aren't butlers, are they?" Elena didn't answer. Ethan did. "I prefer complete security, especially after being attacked," he said evenly. Sophie turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. "I can imagine, but forgive me for asking. Why would a man like you rescue an ordinary woman and keep her here?" The table fell silent. Isla's eyes flickered, but Ethan merely set down his glass. "Because I owed her an explanation," he said softly, "and perhaps a choice." "A choice," Sophie echoed, voice like glass. "Or control. Men like you don't do charity. You don't save without reason. Elena, people like him don't believe in accidents." Elena's chest tightened. Ethan didn't respond, and somehow his silence was more unsettling than words could have been. After dinner, Sophie pulled her outside onto the terrace. Snow drifted down in delicate flakes. "You need to leave this place," Sophie whispered, gripping her hand. "I don't know what's going on here, but something's wrong. I can feel it." Elena looked back through the glass doors. Ethan stood in the dining hall, speaking quietly with Isla. Calm, precise, unknowable. "I know you're worried," she said softly. "But he saved me, Sophie. He's not what you think." Sophie's grip tightened. "The most dangerous kind of man is the one who believes he's saving the world. He'll drown you while thinking he's saving you." The words hit like a cold wind. For the first time, Elena didn't know what to believe. Was she protected or controlled? Safe or trapped? She turned back toward the estate, golden light spilling into the night snow, beautiful and terrifying all at once. And deep inside, she felt it, the first crack in her certainty, after that tense evening when Sophie's words still echoed, like the cold echo of snow in her mind. Elena realized that the atmosphere inside the Vale estate had changed. The silence here was no longer peace. It was a thin veil hiding something heavy beneath, something breathing in the shadows of those thick stone walls. Ethan rarely appeared. Isla disappeared into confidential meetings. Only Ryan and the guards moved restlessly day and night, turning the Vale estate into a fortress waiting for a war to begin. Sophie stayed for a few more days, but Elena could feel the unease radiating from her. She would sit for hours by the window, clutching her phone, eyes drifting toward the steel fence, as if waiting for a message she both dreaded and needed. One gray afternoon, Elena found her in the garden, sitting alone on a stone bench, half buried in snow, her face pale, lips trembling. "Sophie?" Elena called softly. "Are you okay?" Sophie startled, quickly slipping her phone into her coat pocket. "I'm fine." Her answer came too fast, too stiff. Elena sat beside her, waited a few silent breaths before speaking again. "It's Ben, isn't it?" Sophie's shoulders sagged. "I don't know what to do. He's in trouble again. Gambling, debt. But this time, it's worse. He owes money to someone you mentioned once, Marco Darcy." That name sliced through Elena's memory like a cold blade. Marco Darcy, Ethan Vale's rival, the one she had seen in the encrypted documents of Vale Logistics, a name tied to weapons smuggling, human trafficking networks, and unspeakable crimes. The kind of man who didn't understand the word mercy. Elena's voice dropped. "What does he want from you?" Sophie turned toward her, eyes wide with despair. "He said if I don't help, Ben will die. He only wanted a little information, just enough to find this place." "I didn't mean to tell him much, Elena. I swear. I only said the estate was near the Ridgeview Range, that there are 3 layers of security. He promised that would be enough." But promises from men like Marco Darcy were nothing more than traps. A distant explosion shattered the frozen air. The ground trembled under their feet. Then came the wail of sirens, the alarm of Vale Estate, screaming into the stillness. Red emergency lights burst to life across the main building, flashing over the white snow like blood spilled across silk. Ryan's voice crackled over the comms. "All units positions. Unidentified vehicles approaching the perimeter." Elena barely had time to react before guards rushed them inside. The steel doors slammed shut, locks clicking like a sentence being passed. Isla appeared in the hall, her face pale and controlled. "Who gave away our location?" No one spoke. Sophie's hands shook. Ethan appeared seconds later, black coat dusted with snow, eyes hard as iron. His gaze landed on Sophie just long enough for her to break. "I didn't mean to," she stammered. "Marco Darcy doesn't need intent," Ethan said, voice low and sharp. "He just needs a weakness, and you gave him one." Elena stepped between them. "She didn't know Ethan. He threatened her brother." Ethan stood silent for a long moment before turning to Ryan. "Assemble the strike team. We leave now. If Marco set foot on my mountain, he won't leave alive." Elena caught his arm. "You can't just leave her here if he has Sophie." "You're not coming," he said firmly, eyes burning with warning. "No." Her voice trembled but did not waver. "She's my friend. She came here because of me. If she dies, I'll never forgive myself." Their eyes locked in the crimson light, one filled with iron resolve, the other with desperate conviction. Finally, Ethan exhaled slowly. "Fine, but you stay within my sight, not 1 second out of it." The Vale convoy tore through the snow-covered roads. Headlights cut sharp lines through the storm. Inside the lead vehicle, silence hung heavy. Ryan's voice came through the radio, clipped and urgent. "Darcy's holding Sophie in an abandoned warehouse near the Snowfield River. He's demanding ransom and Vale's system codes." Ethan sat in the front seat, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. "No negotiation. We go in, get her, and erase the trail." Elena sat behind him, hands frozen in her lap. She looked at the faint scar along his wrist, an old wound barely healed. For the first time, she realized how much of himself he'd already lost to this world. Every drop of blood shed for the Vale name seemed etched into his skin. And suddenly, the thought of him not coming back made her chest tighten in a way she couldn't bear. When the vehicle stopped, Ryan spoke quietly. 300 meters ahead, 8 guards outside, 2 snipers on the roof. Darcy's inside. Ethan checked his weapon, voice low and steady. "We go in silent, no survivors." He turned to Elena, his eyes softening for a fleeting second. "Don't be afraid." "I'm not," she said, though her hands were trembling so hard that her nails cut into her palms. The wind howled between rusted containers. Weak yellow light flickered across the snow-stained ground. Marco Darcy stood in the open, tall and broad-shouldered, his grin sharp as glass. "Vale, I knew you'd come. Took only a terrified little friend of yours to draw you out." Ethan stepped from the shadows, gun in hand but lowered. His voice was calm, too calm. "Let her go, Marco. I came for my people." Marco laughed, the sound coarse and cruel. "Your people? You mean the ones you use, discard, and bury?" Elena's eyes found Sophie, tied, gagged, slumped against the wall. Before thought could stop her, she shouted, "Sophie!" and ran forward. "No, Elena," Ethan's voice roared, but it was too late. 2 guards turned, rifles lifting, muzzles flashed, snow exploded. Ethan dove, catching her, dragging her to the ground as bullets tore through the air. Gunfire erupted, sharp, deafening. Ryan's men returned fire, the night igniting in bursts of orange and white. The warehouse became chaos, shouts, shattered glass, the echo of death bouncing between steel walls. Pinned beneath Ethan, Elena could hear nothing but his heartbeat, strong and steady against her ear, the single sound that kept her anchored amid the storm. He looked down at her, eyes burning through the smoke and fear. "Stay calm," he whispered, voice rough but certain. "I promise, we'll bring her home." And in that moment, Elena understood. She didn't just trust him anymore. She feared losing him. And that fear burned hotter than any bullet in the cold night. Gunfire still roared through the night. The air was thick with smoke and gunpowder, burning cold in every breath. Elena pressed herself against the frozen ground, feeling Ethan's warmth beside her, his shoulders tense, his eyes scanning the darkness with razor focus. She had never seen him like this, his gaze sharp as a blade, his face void of fear, almost devoid of emotion. When Marco Darcy shouted for his men to fire, Ethan reacted instantly. 2 bullets left his gun in a heartbeat, striking both guards near Sophie. They dropped before they could scream. "Ryan, smoke," he commanded. A flash of white exploded across the warehouse. Smoke billowed up, swallowing the room in a choking fog. Through the haze, Vale's men moved like shadows. Elena held her breath, gripping Ethan's arm as he pulled her along the steel wall. The world around them dissolved into chaos, the crack of gunfire, the clang of metal, the echo of voices shouting in fear and rage. Through the swirling smoke, Ethan dropped beside Sophie, cutting through her bindings. "Are you hurt?" His words were short, steady. Sophie shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks, too shaken to speak. "Ryan, get her to the car," Ethan barked, then turned to Elena. "Stay behind me." Elena nodded, her heart pounding so violently she could barely breathe. Marco emerged from the shadows, face streaked with blood, eyes blazing with fury. He raised his gun. Elena gasped, "Ethan, look out!" Ethan spun, fired. The bullet tore through Marco's shoulder, sending him staggering back with a snarl. "Vale," Marco spat, his voice rough with pain. "You think you can win? You think you're a hero? You're just a killer, pretending to be righteous." Ethan didn't answer. His eyes were cold as he stepped forward, gun leveled, the flickering lights glinting off the barrel. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but I know who I kill and why." Marco tried to lift his gun again, but Ethan fired first. The shot echoed, sharp and final. Marco collapsed, his blood dark against the snow-dusted floor. The silence that followed was deafening, only the hiss of smoke and the sound of ragged breathing. Ryan shouted, "Clear, we have the target, move out." Ethan turned to Elena, reached down, pulled her to her feet. His hand was steady, strong, trembling only slightly. "Let's go." They reached the parking lot. Snow still fell, swirling under the pale yellow floodlights. Sophie was alive, pale and shaking, tears frozen on her lashes. Ethan helped her into the vehicle, then gave the order, "Fall back, now." Engines roared to life. The convoy sped off through the twisting mountain roads. Headlights cut through sheets of snow, painting everything in ghostly white. In the back seat, Elena sat beside Ethan, her hands clenched together. Sophie was in the front, resting her head on Ryan's shoulder, silent tears streaming down her face. For a brief moment, it seemed like it was over, until Ethan suddenly stiffened. His voice was quiet, but his tone made everyone freeze. "Stop the car." Ryan glanced back. "Sir?" "Quiet," Ethan murmured, eyes narrowing toward the road ahead. Through the swirling snow, a massive shape loomed into view. A shipping container parked sideways across the path. No markings, no lights. "Ambush," Ethan said sharply. "Everyone down." Before the word had finished leaving his mouth, bullets rained down. Glass shattered. Ryan pulled Sophie to the floor just as Ethan threw himself over Elena, shielding her with his body. The sound of metal being torn apart filled the air, mingling with screams and the relentless hiss of gunfire. Ethan moved before fear could reach anyone else. "Return fire, left flank, 3 shooters." His voice was a command, calm, precise, absolute. He pushed open the door, vanishing into the storm of bullets. "Ethan!" Elena screamed after him, but he was already gone. Through the flicker of headlights and smoke, she saw him move, fast, deliberate, lethal. Each motion was exact, efficient. Every shot he fired hit its mark. He wasn't just fighting, he was orchestrating death. For the first time, Elena saw who Ethan Vale truly was. Not the quiet man who had offered her safety, not the stoic savior from the storm, but the soldier beneath it all, forged in violence, shaped by loss. His movements were instinct, survival, precision. And yet, in that same man, she could still feel the flicker of humanity, buried but not gone. Her whole body trembled, torn between fear and awe. In the flashes of gunfire, he turned, and their eyes met through the smoke. His gaze burned with something more than fury. It was pain. It was truth. "Left side clear," Ryan shouted. "Right side, 2 remaining." Ethan pivoted, firing twice. Silence followed. Only the wind remained, howling over the mountains. Moments later, engines approached. Vale reinforcements. The ambush was over. Ethan exhaled, lowered his weapon, and started back toward the car, his boots crunching in the snow. Elena ran to him, threw her arms around him before she could stop herself. His clothes reeked of smoke and blood, but he was warm, alive, real. "Are you hurt?" she whispered. He looked down at her, voice rough. "No, you." She shook her head. Tears slipped down her cheeks and vanished into the snow. Ethan reached up, brushed her face gently with his thumb. "It's over." He turned to Ryan. "Get them back to the estate. No one says a word until I give the order. I want to know who leaked our route." The convoy rolled again through the storm. The snow fell heavier now, muting every sound but the hum of the engine. Elena leaned against Ethan's shoulder, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. Heavy, tired, but steady. For the first time, she understood the truth of their bond. It was no longer about survival or gratitude. It was something deeper, forged in chaos and fire, a thread that bound 2 souls that had just walked through hell and come out still breathing. Outside, snow kept falling, but inside that dark bullet-scarred car, Elena's heart beat in perfect rhythm with his, as if both had just been reborn in the same moment, beneath the same storm. After the ambush on the mountain road, no one at the Vale estate slept peacefully again. The air grew heavy, electric with tension, like a storm waiting to break. The corridor lights stayed on all night. Ethan barely left his office. Whenever Elena passed by, she saw him in front of the wide digital map, his rough voice issuing sharp commands through the comms. The intelligence arrived on the third night. Ryan knocked and handed Ethan an encrypted USB. Ethan plugged it in, eyes narrowing as satellite images appeared. An abandoned industrial complex south of Aspen, Marco Darcy's hideout. "He's not hiding anymore," Ethan said, voice cold as steel. "He wants a war, then we'll give him one." Elena stood in the doorway, the chill of his words cutting through her skin. She saw the light in his eyes, not anger, not fear, but the grim resolve of a man who had no other choice but violence. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. He met her gaze. "End it, once and for all." Isla entered, carrying a set of blueprints. The two of them spoke in low tones, all business, maps, security grids, exit routes, target lists. They discussed the operation with the calm of people planning a meeting, but Elena knew every red mark on that map meant another life soon to be erased. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "You already saved Sophie. You've protected all of us. Don't go down this path any further." Ethan looked at her for a long time. "If I don't go, he'll come here. If I falter, the people I love die." "Do you understand, Elena? Some men don't stop until they're forced to." She couldn't answer. Only the wind moaned outside the window. Ethan turned away, voice low. "When I come back, everything will be different." Near midnight, Vale's convoy departed. Armored vehicles rolled out of the snow-covered forest, headlights slicing through the blizzard. Elena stood on the balcony, watching them fade into the storm, her heart tightening painfully. Isla came up behind her, draping a wool coat over her shoulders. "He'll come back," Isla said softly but firmly. "Ethan's never broken a promise." "This time's different," Elena whispered, eyes fixed on the empty road. "This time it's a real war." Isla didn't deny it. They sat in the vast living room, the only sound the slow ticking of the clock, each second like a heartbeat. The night stretched endlessly. Every time an engine roared in the distance, Elena's heart leapt. She imagined 100 possibilities. Ethan shot, trapped, betrayed by his own men. She didn't pray. She only clenched her hands until her nails drew blood. Time crawled. 3 a.m. The snow still fell outside. Isla stood to make tea, but Elena couldn't move, her eyes locked on the window. Then the distant growl of engines, headlights sweeping through the trees. "It's them," Isla whispered. Elena ran, down the hall, down the stairs. The front doors burst open, spilling in cold air mixed with the scent of smoke, metal, and blood. Ethan stepped inside, coat smeared with mud and blood, hair disheveled, his face drawn with exhaustion. But his eyes were softer now, calm and achingly human. He stopped in front of her, voice low, hoarse from smoke and wind. "It's done. He won't be coming back." Elena didn't ask for details. She simply stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. He held her tightly, stiff at first, then slowly relaxing, his breath warm against her hair. "You did what you had to do," Isla said quietly behind them, her voice stripped of its usual sharpness, replaced with weary understanding. "We'll bear the aftermath, but tonight, no more blood. Ethan nodded once, eyes closing briefly, as if to erase the last image of the battlefield. I'll take responsibility for everything. Elena looked up at him, at the dried blood on his face, the peace that replaced the rage. It wasn't victory she saw there, but release, for him, for all of them. When she took his hand, cold as steel but trembling faintly, she knew that moment had changed them forever. The war was over, but between them, something new had begun, quiet, deep, and impossible to name. The morning after the war, the Vale estate was wrapped in a strange stillness. No more radio chatter, no echoing boots in the corridors. Snow blanketed the courtyard, glowing under the pale winter light. Elena woke in her familiar room, but the air felt different, lighter yet emptier. She found Ethan in the library. He sat by the fireplace, white shirt sleeves rolled up, a cup of cold coffee in his hand. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, tracing the sharp, tired lines of his face. He looked up when he saw her. "Did you sleep?" "A little," she murmured, stepping closer. "You?" "Not at all," he said quietly. "There's something I need to tell you." Elena froze, her chest tightening. "You can leave," Ethan said slowly, each word deliberate. "No one here has the right to keep you. If you want to start over somewhere else, I'll arrange everything. Whatever debt you think you owe me, consider it paid." For a moment, only the wind filled the silence. His words should have felt like freedom, but instead, they hollowed something inside her. "You sound like you want me to go," she whispered. Ethan stared into his cup, eyes distant. "I want you free. You don't belong in my world, a place where everything has a price, and sometimes that price is blood." She took a step closer. "But if I leave, I'll be alone again. And if I stay, at least I'll be in a world that's real, cruel, maybe, but honest." He lifted his gaze to hers. For the first time, she saw hesitation there, fear and faith woven together. After a long pause, he said quietly, "I've been thinking I'll change it. 5 years, that's how long I need to make Vale fully legitimate. No more shadow deals, no more blood. I owe you that. I owe myself that." Elena held his gaze. "If I stay," she said softly, "I have one condition." "What is it?" "No lies, no secrets, not even the smallest one. I can live with the truth, but not with being kept in the dark." A faint smile touched his lips, rare, fragile, gone almost as soon as it appeared. "Deal?" he said. "No lies, no secrets." Silence settled again. Then he stepped closer, stopping just a breath away. "Elena," he said, voice low, warm, like a confession. "I don't know what you'll choose, but if you stay—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. She already knew. Elena lifted her hand, brushing his cheek, feeling the faint tremor beneath his composure. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "I've run far enough." Ethan nodded once, his hand closing around hers, drawing her gently into his arms. Their breath mingled, the scent of smoke, coffee, snow melting against skin. There was no rush, no urgency, just a soft kiss, quiet and slow, like a promise. Outside, snow drifted past the windows, melting against the glass. For the first time since she'd met Ethan Vale, Elena felt her heart stop running. Time passed, and winter slowly retreated from the valley, giving way to the first tender leaves of spring. The snow melted into thin streams along the stone steps of the Vale estate. No more gunfire, no more howling winds through the pines, only birdsong and the scent of warm earth, after long months of cold and silence. Ethan kept his word. 6 months later, Vale Logistics was no longer a name whispered in fear. He shut down all covert branches, invested in green technology and education for veterans, men who, like him, had once been lost to war. Ryan oversaw security, Isla managed finance, and Elena, she became the voice of the company, writing its first transparent reports to the government. Life began to settle, and with it, something miraculous grew. Elena was 7 months pregnant. Every morning, she sat by the window, hand resting over her belly, watching the forest bloom again. Ethan rarely stayed away for long. No matter how busy he was, he always returned at night, bringing her warm milk and quiet smiles as he felt their child move beneath his palm. One evening, under the golden light of dusk, Ethan walked into the garden. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a simple gray sweater. Elena looked up and their eyes met. There was peace there now, the kind that only comes after surviving too much. "Do you remember the first time we met?" he asked softly. "In the blizzard," she smiled. "You told me not to move." "And you didn't listen," he said, smiling back. They both laughed. Then Ethan knelt before her, resting a hand on her stomach. His eyes were warm but steady. "Elena," he said, "I spent my life trying to control everything. Work, war, even my own fear. But I can't control this, and I don't want to call it duty. It's a choice." He opened a small box, a simple silver ring, glinting in the sunset. "Not out of obligation, not out of redemption, but because I want to be with you, always." Elena laughed through her tears. "You already know my answer." Their wedding came a month later, in the garden where the snow had finally melted. Early spring flowers grew among wet grass. No crowds, no extravagance, just a few trusted friends. Isla signed the papers, Ryan stood beside the groom, and Elena, in a plain white dress, trembled as Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger. When he kissed her, the wind carried the scent of blossoms and new earth, the scent of life itself. A year after the accident that had begun it all, the Vale estate echoed with the first cry of a newborn. Aria Vale, a tiny girl with her father's gray eyes and her mother's quiet strength. Ethan stood by the bed, eyes wet, unable to speak. Isla waited in the hall. Ryan laughed into his hands, and Elena whispered to the little one, "Welcome to the world, my love." Outside, spring had returned once more. Sunlight streamed through the window, brushing Aria's peaceful face. Elena leaned against Ethan, warmth filling the space between them. She whispered, voice soft as a breeze, "I once thought the snow would bury me, but it led me home." Ethan tightened his hold on her hand, smiling faintly. "And I found my reason to begin again." In that moment, there was no past, no darkness, only peace, rebirth, and a love born from the ruins.